Welcome to episode 7 of Generation 2 of the Perfect Genetics Challenge. We're working hard to get all of the children and teens aged up, and they have to be educated before they are aged up. Here are Denise and Daryl working on their child skills. They recently aged up. They are the eldest two children of Cindy and Bill. And Cindy, of course, is the second generation Sim who is having the babies to make the third generation, and she's already got her heir. Little Donna is still a toddler and she is working on her toddler skills. And she's got a twin sister, but only little Donna has the correct hair and eye colour to become Cindy's heir. It was after dark when Daryl decided to go outdoors and use one of the easels that are in the yard, and he was painting. He placed his imaginary friend doll onto the ground and it immediately became live. So now that imaginary friend is living in the homeless Sims household at the moment. But once it becomes real, it will be in this household. And Denise has finished painting. So Daryl and his imaginary friend are now going to become buddies, and Daryl's going to have to go and make a potion so that he can make his imaginary friend real. But not before some of the teens have aged up to a young adult and moved out, and a few of the children, the older children, will have aged up to teen as well. The alien boys are all working on learning the potions. Two of them have already got their potion to make their imaginary friend real. Max is A grade at school. I've got Denise and Daryl learning logic by playing chess because I don't want to add any extra chemistry tables to this household. And if they can get their logic up high, they can learn the potion to make their imaginary friends real very quickly. They just need to be at level 8 in logic, so they don't have to. If they start looking for the potions without any logic skill, they've got to keep working on finding potions until they're at level 8 before they can make the imaginary friend metamorphism potion. But if they're already at level 8, it could possibly be their first or second or even third potion they make, because it's random the way when the potions come, so long as they've got the logic skill at a high enough level. The teens and Bobby are upstairs in the kitchen sitting around the table reading books, recipes and fishing books. So I think it's time they headed off to Egypt, where they can read their books and I can save their progress without worrying about error 12s happening. Martin had an opportunity that he got in France. He needed to catch 2 crocodiles and take them back to France. So I sent him off to go fishing. Haven't quite made up my mind yet if I'll send him back to France to deliver the crocodiles or not. I probably should finish off that opportunity for him. But he is almost ready to age up to young adult. And when he moves out, I will send Bobby with him because Bobby's a young adult. The only reason he's still in the household is I was using him as a travelling sim. He, of course, is Cindy's imaginary friend made real, and I need to make room in this household, and there's no need to keep Bobby in it. He's just taking up extra space. I can easily use Cindy or Bill or one of Cindy's parents as a travelling sim when I need to move others out. The travelling sim's function is to go to the new world with the sims that are going to stay there and then travel home again, so I can easily get back home to the main world. So there's Martin. He's now turned up at the fishing hole and he's going to start fishing. And of course Bart will accompany Martin when he moves out, because Bart is Martin's imaginary friend made real. So when Martin moves out, we'll be having 3 extra sims leaving the household. So that will help things along a little bit, I hope. They've agreed to stay in Egypt for 6 days, and their main focus of what they'll be doing here is reading recipe and fishing books. Once they've done that, all of the reading they can do, depending on the level of their skills, then they might start looking into a few of the tombs. But I don't think I'll show you much about the tombs because it's not really about walking through tombs in this series, and I've already done all of that in the Isle of Paradiso Bunch playlist too. I will get the Sims that's fishing with a fishing skill that's less than 7. I will get them to do a lot of fishing to get their skill up to level 7. That way they can read all of the fishing bait books. Now I had a bit of a dilemma as to where I was going to get my Sims to sit to read all those books. In the past I have had Sims self-combust from being out in the sun for too long, and they do have chairs in the base camp, but those chairs are out in the open in the sun. So I thought I would get Bobby to open up this little tomb which is right next to the base camp. It is the first tomb they get a chance to go through, and there are several seats inside that tomb. So I got my Sims away from the sunshine and into the tomb to read their books for most of the time. So that's why Bobby was doing that tomb. Cindy is carrying all of the fishing books in her inventory, and each of the Sims, including Cindy, has got recipe books in their inventories. Everybody who's travelling has got a multi-tab in their inventory, and on that multi-tab they can read any of the books that are in the inventories of any of the other Sims on their lot, provided that they stay on the lot, of course. I find that this turned out to be a much easier way of getting them to read on the multi-tabs because it only had a few books to scroll through. At home, in the bookcases, they've got so many, and you have to scroll through everything every time you want to find a book they haven't read yet that they need to read. Bobby's already read most of what he needs to read and got the skills he needs, so I'll let him go do a bit of adventuring, break the monotony a little bit, but the others were pretty much focused on reading books and learning skills while they were in Egypt. While he was wandering around doing a bit of adventuring, Bobby came across a huge pyramid near a waterhole. It wasn't near any other pyramids, and he decided he'd have a look and inspect one of the pushable statues, and most of them were just dead statues, but this one he found that he could push it, so he pushed it. And it revealed a set of steps. What a surprise. So naturally he had to go down those steps and see what he could find down there. This isn't part of any adventure, it's just a little extra that you can do if you're curious and want to see what's down there. Cindy joined him and she went down the steps as well, and Bart came along later on, and they all three of them had a good look around. They found several rubble piles that could be cleared, and there was small treasures under them and some keystones that they needed to get into doors and treasure chests. The one that is working on at the moment is blocking a doorway. There's Cindy, she's about to go downstairs. Bobby has cleared the rubble pile, but he's not through the door yet. The door requires somebody to push it open. It became quite an effort, it took him a long time, but he persisted. But that door was faking it. It wasn't really open, and he had to get back to work trying to open it. It took him quite a while. Several minutes later, he's still trying to get that door open. Then it looks like it's opening, and he's so happy. But it's only pretending. It's not really opening at all. It's going to slam shut on him, and he tries to walk through it. Oops! He jumped back just in time. So now he's got to get back to work. Leave him to it, I think. It's just taking too long. But he does eventually get it open. And then he has a look to see if it was all worth the effort on the other side. Bobby found himself in a long, narrow hallway, and he could see some ancient coins sparkling at the end of it. So he went and picked them up. And then he saw some more. Wow, he got them too. And then he found out that there was another door he could go through, but it needed a star keystone to get through it. So it was back to the original room, because there were more piles of rubble to clear there, and surely there'd be a keystone somewhere. Cindy went and collected some treasure off a pedestal, and Bart helped Bobby clear the rubble piles. Clearing piles of rubble is another sort of skill that they can acquire, because the more they clear, the faster they get at clearing them, up to a point. Eventually one of them came across a star keystone and collected it, and then they were able to open that door that required a star keystone to open. And when they went into that room, they found more rubble piles to clear, and there was a sarcophagus hiding behind one of them. Bobby got to work on the sarcophagus rubble pile. He's getting pretty good at clearing rubble piles now, although he's still got a long way to go before he gets really good. Bobby worked on the pile of rubble while Cindy and Bart took care of other things to be found in the tomb. Cindy opened up the treasure chests and collected some treasure. Bart took care of another little rubble pile. They didn't find very much. It was just bits of food and some broken pots and things like that. Cindy found several cut gems in the second treasure chest that she opened. And Bobby's just finished with that sarcophagus rubble pile. We'll get him to look inside the sarcophagus to see what he can find. Bobby searched in the sarcophagus for a while, and he did find some treasures, but he didn't tell me what they were. But I don't think they were very valuable. It was just a little adventure for them to do while they waited for the others to finish reading their books. It was almost time to go home. Bobby had to find some gemstones to do Morku Corp adventure, and he had to report in, and he found a zombie wandering around in their house. He had just collected the final gemstone when he came across that pushable statue in that distant tomb that they had just ransacked. But he did manage to report in. I was in two minds about letting him continue with this one. It's led on from when he opened up that first tomb where they were sitting on the chairs reading their books indoors to avoid spontaneous combustion from sitting in the sun for too long. In the end, I relented and let him continue with it for a little bit. Meanwhile, back at the base camp, some Sims were sleeping in their tents. Cindy was sitting reading a book at the fire pit, and Bart was playing catch with one of the tourists. When Bobby got back, he joined Cindy at the fire pit and whipped out his multi-tab and started reading a book that he'd been reading for a while, hadn't quite finished yet. When the game of catch had finished, Bart joined Cindy and Bobby around the fire pit, and the tourists went back to sleep in his tent. It was a peaceful night, but there were aliens about, and I was really hoping somebody was not going to get abducted from the base camp. At least it's not somebody from the travelling party that belongs to this household. The time continued progressing quietly, and nothing untoward happened to anyone. Now Cindy finished reading her book, and she has an almost unlimited supply of harvestables in her inventory, and she was sitting in front of a fire pit. So of course she had to cook some veggies over the fire pit and have a little snack before she went to bed for the night. And eventually they all went into their tents and had a sleep for an early start for the next day. Their trip was nearly over. But first, Cindy had to finish eating her vegetables, and the other two were still reading their books. They were taking their time. They were on holidays after all, and there was no rush, just so long as they got all of the necessary reading done before they returned home. They didn't have to worry about completing adventures on time. Next morning, Martin woke up early and was up before the sun, and he went and found a place with a dig site, and he started excavating to look for treasure. It was on a little island in the middle of the river. He's almost ready to age up to young adult. He's still got to get to grade A at school. He and Bart are both still at grade B, so there's a few more days of school to do after they get back to Moonlight Falls. Bobby's another one who was up early the next morning, and he had completed the next part of the Morka Corp adventure, and now he had to go and collect some flame fruit from the Tomb of the Burning Sands. It took him ages to get there, and when he finally did arrive, he found there was a whole group of Sims waiting for him. He hadn't been expecting a welcoming committee. In amongst that group were Bart and Barbara, the two imaginary friends made real who had previously belonged to Martin and Mary. They'd been here reading their books, getting ready to age up and become young adults so they could move out. All they've got to do now is get to grade A at school. They've read enough books. They might read some more, but they don't have to. And they've got enough skills, but they could get some more skills, but they don't have to. And there is the spot where Bobby needs to insert the keystone. And of course, Bobby is an imaginary friend made real of Cindy, and he can move out at any time because he's already a young adult. He became a young adult when Cindy aged up. Bart got some more practice at clearing rubble piles while Barbara decided to check out what she could find in the sarcophagus, while Bobby went into the room he'd just opened with the keystone, and he found he needed to dive into a dive well, and that was a really bad idea for poor Bobby because he's hydrophobic. Now that Barbara has searched that sarcophagus for everything she could find, it's available as a bed. Anybody who's here and needs to have a snooze can sleep in the sarcophagus after it's been emptied of its treasures. Now there is an interesting thing, a hole in the wall. Barbara can go over there and check it out and see what she can find, and Bart's revealed a floor switch that he needs to put a pushable statue onto, and there's a pushable statue, so guess what Bart's going to do next? So Bart is pulling the pushable statue towards the floor switch he's just revealed, and Barbara has now finished clearing the rubble pile that was in front of that hole in the wall that she was trying to get to, so she can now inspect the hole in the wall. Bart needs to push the statue for the rest of the way onto that floor switch. He can't pull it any further because the wall's in the way. Now he just needs to do one little push and then a little pull to place it onto the floor switch. Meanwhile, Barbara's all excited. She's waiting impatiently to inspect that hole in the wall. And now Bart has revealed a hidden door which is opening, and there's a treasure chest inside. And Bart's going to make sure that he gets to open this one, and he finds a canopic jar inside, which he takes and puts in his own inventory. He can take that with him to his new house when he grows up and becomes a young adult. Finally, Barbara's able to put her hand into that hole in the wall, and she searches around until she finds a switch, and she pulls it, and there's a set of steps going down a level, and she goes down there and she finds lots of flame fruit growing, and she calls Bobby, who comes and picks it, but it's not enough. They need more. So poor Bobby has to go back to the room with those scary dive wells in them, the dive wells that are full of water, and the water's what he's so frightened of. He finds he's got to disarm traps, but really he'd rather disarm 1,000 traps than jump into one of those wet, watery dive wells. Poor Bobby. Eventually, between the three of them, they complete a couple of the tombs in this big pyramid, and Bobby runs off with his flame fruit and reports in. And then he gets another opportunity to go and search for a book in a hidden ancient library. And he finds the book and he sits down and he reads it. Now, I've never had a sim read that book before. I was wondering if it would just vanish once he'd finished reading it, but it didn't. He just read the book and then he went and handed it in and got his reward. And then it was time for us all to go back to Moonlight Falls. I think the book was called The Story of the Three Relics. Life back at the main household was chaotic as usual. Bill had to rush off to work for the culinary courier. Little Debbie was outside playing with her imaginary friend Doll. And of course, lots of townies lounging around the yard as usual. When everybody came home from school, they settled down to do their homework. It soon became obvious to me that Bobby had to go. It was impossible for me to save this without getting an error 12. The house was just way too overcrowded. So later that night, Olivia took Bobby to live in Mountain Lake. So later that evening, Olivia and Bobby caught a taxi and headed off for Mountain Lake. We'll see Bobby settling in, and Olivia's going to spend some time with some of her grandchildren. On arrival at Mountain Lake, they stayed at the base camp. This is the little house that I turned into a base camp by changing the lot type using Master Controller or Traveller or something. It was an NRES mod anyway. So Bobby decided he'd play in the sprinkler, but I didn't like that idea. I didn't find a suitable house for him, but there was an empty lot. So I took a copy of the house next door to the empty lot and placed it on a lot, and Bobby's moved in there. I've given him some extra furniture and unpacked his inventory. He's got all of the goodies that he collected while he was travelling. So he's all set up happily now, and we'll leave him there. Olivia, in the meantime, has moved in with her second eldest son, James, and his wife, Carla, and their 4 children. Just in case you're worried about how to do the base camp thing, if you've got the correct mod in your mods folder, you just go into Edit Town, change the lot type to Community Lot, and choose base camp from the list of lot types. There's James's daughters, Francine and Amelia, doing their homework. Olivia has arrived at their place, and she is having something to eat because she was starving. That's Amelia sitting there doing her homework. And there's Carla, James's wife. She's writing books. She's a professional author. We're going to have a quick look around Mountain Lake to see where all of the children are. We might run across some of the Sims that I've moved here from Moonlight Falls as well. Well, there's James. He's sitting on a seat there reading something on his tablet. James is Olivia's second eldest son, and that plant sim is Petal. She is Olivia's plant sim daughter. And the 2 children, the one with the red wings sitting down doing her homework, is Olivia's granddaughter, and her grandson has got the blue wings, and they are children of Olivia's eldest son, Gary, and his wife, Donna. Donna's a fairy. And the children's names are Elsie and Charlie. That's him sitting beside James. Looks like one of the townies I moved here from Moonlight Falls. After solving her hunger problem by having a little meal, Olivia cleaned out the bad food from the refrigerator. The above ground parts of this house came with the world, and I haven't changed it very much. And next door is where Olivia's eldest son Gary and his wife Donna and their 2 children Elsie and Charlie live. So the grandchildren all live close to each other. To make room for the family, I had to add a basement, and this is the basement. It's only a single level basement. Of course, I had to destroy this world by turning all 4 of the imaginary friends real, and I've got the children setting to work on their discovering potions. In the end, I decided I wasn't going to wait for them to find all the potions, and I got James to make them, and we turned the imaginary friends real, and then we couldn't save without an error 12. So luckily I've already decided to move on from this world. I did manage to save all the imaginary friends, but once they were made real, but once they were saved, you got to close down and relaunch, and after each save, if you want to avoid an error 12, just like in Moonlight Falls. I knew that was going to happen, but I just did it anyway. To be clear, I was already concerned about this world being overpopulated, and I was thinking, do I really want to send Bobby here, or should I send him to a different world? But I couldn't decide what different world to send him to, and I decided I'd risk sending him here, and then I added 4 extra Sims to this household. So the world is now overpopulated. I could probably move a household or 2 out to a different world if I wanted to. When Olivia was ready to leave here, I sent her to visit Vice City, which I've already set up, and it's got a sim living in it that I've put in that world. And I think I will be sending the next Sims that I move out of Moonlight Falls. I'll be sending them to Vice City. It's only got 1 sim living in it at the moment. I didn't want to make this whole video about the children learning to make potions and learning their logic skill, so I got their father, James, to work, and he has already made the imaginary friend metamorphism potion because he turned his imaginary friend real, and she is living in this world. Her name's Trish. So he can make 4 imaginary friend metamorphism potions, 1 for each of his children, and he will maximise his logic skill as he does it. He's got to get 2 more points in logic. So I will just leave him there now doing it. We'll come back when it's time to make the imaginary friends real. I noticed that now that he's just making the potions, it just goes straight into his inventory. There's no animation like we see when the children discover a potion. So there's no point just watching him and waiting for that animation because it's not going to happen. Much later, Francine's imaginary friend doll, Wiggles, burst into life. I had been planning for young Jimmy's imaginary friend to be the first one to be made real, but he was off visiting a playmate that he went home from school with. So Francine was available and she got to know her imaginary friend while James kept working at making another potion. He's got 4 to make and he's finished 1 so far. Francine and Wiggles seem to be getting along quite well. What surprised me was all of the dolls, a whole 4 of them, became live as soon as they were taken out of their owner's inventory and put on the floor. So now Wiggles has had a drink of the potion and he's transforming into a child. He's becoming a real sim, and there he is. Now he can go straight into create a sim. I gave him an e-skin fresh skin, but I didn't change his slider position. And I would never give one of my sims vehicle enthusiast as a trait, but that's what he got, so I left him with it. Betty was next to put her doll on the floor and Patches quickly came live. There's Carla walking past. She's going to go back to work writing a book, and James is working hard on the potion for the next imaginary friend to be made real. Now Betty's got to make friends with her doll. I think they're already very good friends because she's been playing with Patches quite a lot. As a matter of fact, I think she was playing on Patches when Patches got put on the floor just now. So they'll chat for a while before Betty offers the potion that James has made for her. Patches and Betty stood there for quite a long time getting to know each other and becoming best friends, and then finally Patches was ready to drink the potion that James had made and given to Betty, especially for Patches. As Patches was transforming, Betty just stood there and watched and wondered what sort of a playmate she was going to have. There she was, and straight into create a sim. I tried to avoid giving my sims the ambitious trait. They're very hard work, I find. Jimmy placed Rags on the floor and then stood and watched his grandma, Olivia, as she played the guitar. So Rags became live, and then he and Jimmy started chatting, getting to talk with each other for the first time ever. They were already very good friends, so it didn't take long before Jimmy was able to offer Rags the potion that Jimmy's father, James, had made and given to Jimmy so he could make his friend Rags real. James took a break from potion making and came to stand and watch his mother, Olivia, play one of the guitars that she'd found lying scattered around James and Carla's house. Suddenly, Jimmy and Rags ran off somewhere, and when I tracked them down, I found they were having a pillow fight. So I guess they'll be really good friends at the end of this, and Rags ought to be ready to drink the potion, hopefully. Well, that pillow fight went on for absolutely ages. It just went on and on with lots of laughing and playing, and then I was right. Rags was ready to accept the potion when Jimmy offered it to him. And down it goes, and there is Rags transforming into a real sim. First I thought he was a little girl sim, but no, he was a boy sim, but he had a ponytail. So Rags went in to create a sim, and this is what happened when he came out. I'm pleased I'm not going to have to play with him very often. I don't think I like his traits very much. I found that Olivia had a visitor. This was little Elsie. She lived next door and is another of Olivia's grandchildren living in this world. Her father is Olivia's eldest son, Gary, and her mother is Donna, a fairy. I've noticed that Olivia isn't very nice with her grandchildren that don't live with her in her own household. I think the don't like children trait must apply more strongly if the child isn't living with her, because she's being quite mean to little Elsie. Eventually she told Elsie to go home, and Elsie did as she was told. It was quite late at night. I think she must have gone next door in the hopes that her grandmother might read her a bedtime story, but Olivia just sent her home. So off Elsie went home. She didn't have far to go because they just live next door to James and Carla and their children. They've got a huge basement with lots of money trees down in that house. Olivia might stay with them next time she comes to visit this world. Here's a couple of the young Sims developing some skills. Pixie and Jimmy are painting. James had one more potion to make, and I wanted him to get to the top of the logic skill, and I discovered that he still needs to find 2 extra potions. So once he's finished making the imaginary friend metamorphism potion that he still needs to make, I'm going to set him to work discovering potions again until he's learnt them all. He will end up with the young again potion. It might come in handy one day. Meanwhile, I'm getting some of the other children who haven't discovered very many potions yet to work on their discovering of potions and developing their logic skill. I'm not going to hang around here until they find everything, but they might as well work on it while I am here. And I discovered that Olivia was outside having a lovely time smashing the children's sandcastles. And she's not being very nice to the grandchildren who live in the house that she's staying in at the moment either. She wasn't just picking on the one that lives next door. She's having a go at this pair that are at home, standing in their own sandpit. Olivia successfully chased Betty and James inside, where Amelia had placed her imaginary friend Lucky on the floor, and Lucky became alive immediately. So now it was time for Amelia and her buddy to make friends. So actually there are already very good friends. They just need to be a little better in their friendship before Lucky will take the potion. And here it is. Lucky's got the potion that James made for it. And now Lucky's transforming into a real sim. We've got another little boy. And here he is after he went into Create a Sim. And his name became Louis. And here he is. Next thing to do was all of the imaginary friends had to learn their child skills, which was why I made them real while they were children. And this is the end of the video because it's gone over 30 minutes already, and we will continue with this household in the next episode. Olivia is about to return home to Moonlight Falls. So we'll start out in this episode, spend a few minutes here, and then we'll go back to the main household in the next episode. So if you've enjoyed the video, and I do hope you have, please give it a like. Likes and comments really help the channel, and so do subscriptions. So thank you to everybody who's already subscribed, and if you'd like to not miss the next episode, then you might like to subscribe. So thank you for watching. Bye bye for now, and happy simming.